Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on secure hybrid access. Today, we're talking about how you can unify identity and policy across cloud and on-premises with a joint solution from Strata and Microsoft Azure Active Directory. My name is Michaela, and I work on the marketing and design team at Strata, and I'm here to moderate. Today, you'll be hearing from Eric Leach, the co-founder and CPO of Strata, and Natee Pretikul, the senior product manager of identity engineering at Microsoft. Both have deep product and identity experience and are looking forward to helping you tackle the secure hybrid access challenge. Just a couple things to keep in mind as you're listening in. First, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in a few days. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's session, so please drop your questions in the Q&A tab and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. Without further ado, let's kick things off. Eric, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michaela. And Natee, super excited to be here with you today. Great intro, Michaela. I am the co-founder, chief product officer at Strata. Have a long background in identity and access management, going back quite a number of years. And fun fact, right now I am actually binge watching the Clone Wars so that I can get ready for all the exciting stuff coming out from the Star Wars universe over the next year.
Cool. And my name is Natee Pretikul, and I'm part of Microsoft Identity Engineering team, and I work there as a senior product manager. I have been with Microsoft over 10 years now, across the globe from Thailand to here now in the US. And in my current job, I focus on zero trust partnerships and how can we really help our customer to be secure. And things I love, including traveling and food. You can see that my favorite thing is really coconut water. So looking forward to share more about my learning, not about food, but about secure hybrid access in this call.
All right, so who is Strata? We helped invent the earlier waves of identity and access management and federated identity. And now we've invented something new, which we call identity orchestration. This is in response to the dozens of customers who told us about the challenges they were facing as they were managing identity now that they had become hybrid and multi-cloud. Using the Mavericks platform, we create an identity fabric that stitches together distributed identity systems and makes them work together in an orchestrated way. We provide three main solutions to our customers. We create a multi-cloud identity control plane so that you can keep identities and policies consistent across all of your cloud identity systems. This is crucial when you run multiple cloud platforms with their own built-in identity systems, and most enterprises are running 3 or more. We enable secure hybrid access, which is, of course, the main topic for today's webinar. What this means is securely extending Azure Active Directory and a zero trust model to integrate with legacy applications running on premises. Using Mavericks, you can authenticate users against Azure AD using SAML or OpenID Connect and give users access to those legacy apps. And you can enforce Azure Active Directory's conditional access policies like requiring MFA or checking the user's device and location. Our last mile integration lets you do all of this without costly rewrites to those apps. And finally, we automatically migrate users from legacy to modern identity systems like Azure Active Directory and transition applications to authenticate those users against Azure Active Directory without any changes to the user experience or the applications themselves. What's different about this approach is users are seamlessly live migrated to Azure Active Directory while they are accessing the applications as they normally do. Natee, let's talk about some of the trends you're seeing in the market and then talk about how our secure hybrid access collaboration is addressing those trends.
Sound good. Thanks, Eric. So within Azure AD, we have seen further acceleration of identity growth with the onset of COVID-19 and global quarantine restrictions, right? And as company had to rapidly move employees to work remotely, identity and security become even more top of mind. So to illustrate just a couple of examples of Azure AD usage growth in the last year, a 40% growth in monthly active users for Azure AD with a spike in February and March. Another number which is quite important, 120% growth in monthly active user accessing application both cloud and on-premise with Azure AD. And in particular here with the on-premise conversation, we have seen a lot of customers are struggling to even think about how can they transition faster.
I don't think there's any question what drove that peak in February and March.
That's right. That's right. Even now, I think a lot of executive level from chief of staff, CIO, and CISO, they have to think about what's next for them in 2021, right? There's a lot of new reality that they learn through the unexpected change this year. For example, many organizations have to think about how can they support all kinds of access to all the applications, right, with all kinds of users. They had to think about how can they scale the VPN. Sometimes many companies still rely on the older technology like VPN. Plus, most of the time, they only factor only about 20% of employee accessing VPN, but now everybody is remote. So it's not about 20% anymore, it's everyone in the organization. And there are things like, there are bad actors that trying to hack to their system. They had to think about, security controls and really sustainable transition to remote work to many employees. So that's the overall reality that people have to kind of think through. And the next one is that to really determine how can we help organizations respond to the challenges of remote work, we actually asked all the leaders, in the security space to tell us what are the top of mind for them. So as you can see, these priorities in the slide are largely centered around the areas that can be solved with a cloud identity solution. Specifically, they are looking forward to empower the users to become more productive, extend security controls to protect application, and again, including on-prem application without VPN. And the other part is they want to have better visibility and controls over personal and off corporate devices. And lastly, secure collaboration tools for working with contractors and partners. And even more than ever, many organizations has to interact with each other, right? Net is really important to bring all the apps and all the resources under one single control plane, like Azure AD solution, for example. And like you probably see, I highlight a few times around the on-premise legacy application, because it's not that simple to move to the control plane. For SaaS application, because many companies leverage SAML or OIDC, which is the modern protocol, it's easier to move and migrate. But the legacy app, and as you can see from this number, 60% to 80% of apps are still on-premise or legacy in nature. So it becomes really difficult for many leaders to think through how can they effectively move mission-critical applications like SAP and Oracle to Azure AD. There are many custom, in-house made application by many developers. How can I move that to Azure AD or the control plane, right? And then I kind of alluded earlier around the legacy auth protocol. While SAML and OIDC are important, but many legacy apps still use header-based auth and other like RDP, right? And all of these sometimes are not secure properly because it's not been looked at by a lot of security and developer for a long, long time for certain applications.
Well, that 60 to 80% number is really high. What do you think is holding customers back from modernizing those?
I think everybody recognizes it's important to modernize their application because they want to move faster, they want to be more secure. But in reality, it's so complex. It's take a lot of time and energy and effort to modernize application. Plus, when it comes down to mission critical application that many customer and employee are using, it's not a few month project. It can take years to actually plan for migration and modernization and train the end users to move to the new application, right? And that's caused a delay in general.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. Let's talk more about the benefit of moving all the application and resources to the control plane like Azure AD here, right? Overall, now everybody are working remotely, so it's important to make sure that the right people have the right access to the right resource and the right application, right? So in this case, when customer leverage Azure AD with Strata as well, we can protect most of the app, both on-premise and cloud. And when a user sign into Azure AD, because we basically have a really robust machine learning to look at all the signal from where the user is located, is that impossible travel or not, what device did they sign in, and all the risky signal that we can get to determine is that the right user or not. And then organization can then take the right action to verify the access, right? They can either allow the access if the right employee sign in. They can also ask for MFA prompt. They can also limit access or block access and even more. And at the end, when we verified people who are the right person to access the right file and app, then they can sign in correctly. And again, the goal is not to add a lot of burden to the user, because if they're the right user, then it should not be prompt for MFA all the time. So that's why the risk score engine that we have is quite robust that way to be able to determine the right next step for employee. And at the end, before I hand over back to you, Eric, one thing to really highlight, when a customer use Azure AD, we support variety of multi-factor authentication options. So in this case, you can see that we support push notification, hardware token, SMS voice, and even the recent new technology like passwordless, right? We also have variety of support like Windows Hello for Business, Microsoft Authenticator app, and FIDO2 security key, even leverage things like biometric to even verify the right user. And overall, based on our data, we see that when organization implement MFA, it prevents 99.9% of identity-related attacks, which is quite huge. So back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Natee. I really want to pick up what you're saying about policies that you can implement in the cloud and things like multi-factor authentication. Using Azure AD conditional access policies and enforcing things like MFA is absolutely critical to implementing a zero trust posture for applications that are deployed on-prem and that weren't built at all to use these modern and advanced capabilities. Adapting those apps to those techniques is almost impossible. Often the enterprises don't even have the source code available to them to change the app to take advantage of those capabilities. What Strata does as we work with Microsoft Azure AD is to extend that secure hybrid access to those on-prem apps. And we do this in a way where you can implement secure hybrid access and zero trust without a change to the user experience and without modifying or rewriting or refactoring the applications. What you get at the end of that is apps that are modernized and standards-based and able to take advantage of multi-factor authentication, but you can do that without having to change the app. Zero trust is going to happen faster. It's going to be more reliably implemented, and it'll be an extension of things that you're already using so that you can make working remote very simple and safe and very intuitive to the users. At Strata, we developed the first distributed multi-cloud identity orchestration platform. And together with Microsoft, enterprises can now seamlessly extend Azure AD to protect on-prem applications with no changes to them. What we do is we provide the last mile to apps. We abstract away the identity from those apps, and we make that transition seamless. Azure AD becomes the identity and authentication provider for any and all enterprise apps, whether those are SaaS, cloud native, or legacy on-prem apps. And how it works is Strata transitions a legacy app from authenticating against an on-premises identity system like CA SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager. We make that transition to Azure AD. Azure AD enforces that granular access that's traditionally enforced by the legacy identity system. And so when we do that authentication with Strata, some attributes will come back in claims from Azure AD, others from on-prem identity systems. They might be attribute providers such as an entitlements database, another LDAP directory that holds groups, or some kind of an API service. And what users get is a single, simple experience, whether they're accessing their SaaS applications through Azure AD or legacy applications using the secure hybrid access model of combining Azure AD with Strata. Let's transition to showing the demo. So what we're going to show today is how to make secure hybrid access work in practice. And what we're going to do is show how Strata transitions the app authentication to Azure AD, that Azure AD will enforce some conditional access policies. And then as that gets passed back into the on-prem environment, Strata enforces granular access policies against that legacy application. And that's how the users are going to get a unified experience across the SaaS and legacy apps.
All right, so let's get into the demo. A legacy identity system is used to protect our on-premises application with simple username and password-based authentication. We're going to use Maverick's Identity Orchestrator to transition this application to using Microsoft's Azure Active Directory and conditional access policies to enforce multi-factor authentication in order to access the app. The user enters a username and password as before, but now through the conditional access policies is required to do multi-factor authentication using a push notification that's sent to the user's registered device. After approving the push notification, the user gets signed into the application without having to change the application to support multi-factor authentication. Now we'll use Maverick's Identity Orchestrator to enforce additional fine-grained access on the app. These policies make sure that only members of the project team from the US can get access to this application. Our user Alan Adkins is in the project team, but he's based in Canada. So when he goes to authenticate to the application, his access is denied by the orchestrator. Our user Genevieve Wright is in the project team and based in the US. So when her multi-factor authentication succeeds, she gets access to the app controlled by those Maverick's Identity Orchestrator policies.
So let's recap. What we just saw is how Strata transitions the app authentication to Azure AD, how we use Azure AD to enforce those conditional access policies for the users trying to access that legacy app, how Strata then takes the information that it's getting back from Azure AD and maybe some of the other identity and attribute providers to enforce the granular access policies from the legacy identity systems as users try to access that app. And then how users get a unified experience, whether they're trying to access a SaaS application or a legacy application. So what does the customer get from a secure hybrid access approach? What they get is a powerful distributed identity orchestration platform that enables a zero trust architecture and leverages Azure AD as the identity provider to protect any app for the enterprise, whether those are SaaS applications or cloud native applications that are running on Azure or legacy applications that are running on-prem. You get a low cost, low touch alternative to those traditional big bang migration projects, which have failed so many times over the years. And you get a way to modernize apps to Azure's standards-based authentication using something like SAML or OpenID Connect with no impact to the apps, no rewrites, no refactors, no redeploys, and without impacting the user experience. And ultimately, what this does is gives the customer a way to make remote work simpler and safer and get to zero trust faster and more reliably.
Cool. So what can you do next? I would totally encourage all of you who listen to the call to go to the Azure AD app gallery. And right now, the solution from Strata is on our app gallery so that all the admin can easily connect Strata solution with Azure AD. Plus, you can also watch the express demo that I'm sure that the link will be provided to you so you can see how you can leverage Strata powerful Maverick solution for all the secure hybrid access need. And I'm sure that you'll be impressed with our joint solution here.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for your time. It's really clear that you both have spent a lot of time listening to customer needs and working to come up with a really intentional solution. To all listeners, thank you for showing up. Now we need you to follow up. I just popped the Marketplace and Express demo link in the chat panel. Follow those to get started. Okay, let's wrap up with some questions. You still have time to ask a few, so please pop them into the Q&A chat panel. Let's get started. What types of customers are leveraging Strata today, Eric?
Yeah, good question. So what we focus on is helping the largest enterprises with their most complex identity problems. That's really our sweet spot. So this is Fortune 100, Fortune 500 types of companies that have really complex multi-identity system kinds of environments who are heavily investing in both multi-cloud and hybrid, and who could really benefit from an orchestration, identity orchestration platform to help bring all of those things together. And we find that so many of those customers are already leveraging Azure Active Directory for authentication to some of the apps in their enterprise. And so it was just a natural, seamless transition to help them integrate their on-prem apps to Azure AD.
That's great. So we have another question that came in. What ROI have you seen with deploying Strata and Azure AD? And this one maybe could go to both of you guys. See both of you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to go ahead first. We actually partner with Forrester to conduct an analysis of how much our customer can expect to save and drive ROI when connect all the apps with Azure AD. So at the high level, per that study, we have seen 123% return on investment by securing all the apps with Azure AD, on-premise included. So as you can imagine that when customers use Strata to extend to legacy application, that also help us to accomplish all the app connection. Second stat I want to highlight here, when customer leverage just one set of credentials, meaning just use one IDP for all kinds of access, it helps save each employee about 10 minutes a week on average. And per our study, it had been valued at $7.1 million US saving over 3 years, which is quite phenomenal.
Wow, yeah, that is phenomenal. We conducted a similar study with one of our systems integrator partners, a global systems integrator partner. And what we found in that study is the cost of rewriting applications is prohibitively high for most enterprises, and is one of the things that's really holding them back from modernizing. It's the thing that delays the projects or defers them altogether. And when we worked with this partner, we found that by saving customers from having to rewrite those applications and still be able to integrate with Azure AD in the way that Natee just explained, and get those benefits, that you could get an additional 400 to 600% ROI out of a migration project. And we've got several examples of customers that are saving literally tens of millions of dollars as they make the transition for hundreds of applications from their legacy identity systems to Azure AD.
Wow. That's great, guys. We have another question here around zero trust. So how does the joint solution help achieve the zero trust strategy? And I know you guys touched on this a little bit already, but can you go one step deeper? How do we get to zero trust quicker?
If you don't mind, I would like to go ahead first. So for Microsoft, we actually just released the zero trust kind of guidance from Microsoft across all the pillars like identity, endpoint, application, data, and infrastructure and networks. But overall, when it comes down to the first step of zero trust, many customers find it successful when they focus on identity, which means that they have to think about how can they bring all the applications, right, to connect with Azure AD. And that is really, really important foundation before you can apply policy, apply protection. That is the first step, right? And when you do that, you also want to look at how can you bring all the app, not just SaaS application, but legacy application. And it is where I think, to your point around how our joint solution helped to achieve zero trust strategy, that's the first step. That's the foundation.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think when you take zero trust below the level of a catchphrase and into an actual strategy that you have to go and implement, the first thing you realize is that the identity is at the center of all of this. And having a clear and consistent strategy for how to identify users and where you want to authenticate them from, and how to safely make a transition from a user that's being authenticated from the cloud into the on-prem, that you really have to accommodate the fact that those apps were meant to be hidden away behind the firewall and didn't expect to have to operate in a zero trust environment. So the identity orchestration layer is a way to put that zero trust as a layer above or on top of these legacy apps without having to go back and rewrite and refactor them all over again. And that gives them the advantages of taking advantage of Azure AD's capabilities. They wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. And so the combination of Azure AD and Strata and identity orchestration means that you can very seamlessly transition those zero trust principles down to those legacy on-premises apps.
All right, so it looks like we're out of time, and just want to thank everyone again for joining. Thank you to our speakers for teaching us today. There's so many valuable insights from today's session. Again, if you want to learn more, you can visit the Azure AD Marketplace or visit strata.io to get your Express demo. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to connect with Eric and Natee on LinkedIn. We look forward to speaking with you again. Bye-bye.